All right, let's dive into our first topic this morning with our first guest. This morning we're looking at the federal perspective on employment for persons with disabilities. And with that perspective is Kathy Martin. She's a Senior Vice President of Human Resources at Loblaws. Kathy was a member of the federal panel on labor market opportunities for persons with disabilities in 2012. She's here to present the panel's final report. That report has led to the formation of the Canadian Business SenseAbility, a new non-for-profit business organization that Kathy chairs called Canadian Business SenseAbility. Its focus is to improve employment outcomes for persons with disabilities, and she joins us today from Toronto. Please welcome Kathy Martin.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Let me just put my water down. There. Okay. So I'm delighted to be here, and I really would like to thank Alberta Employment First, Learning Symposium, for extending the invitation to me. I wanted to speak about two things. I was asked to give a commentary about what's going on in Canada on this subject, and I was part of a panel back in 2012, and the panel was asked and struck by HRSDC as well as the Minister of Finance, at that time Minister Flaherty, and we were asked to go across Canada and talk to as many Canadian business owners as we could, small, medium, large, and ask them what's going on in this world. What are people doing well? And what are people stumbling over? It was an amazing experience. So I want to talk a little bit about that because we had huge findings. The other thing I want to talk about is what have we done since then, because that was 2012. And a lot of work has happened since then. And yes, I am chair of a new not-for-profit organization that is about to launch. I'm doing it almost full-time, so I'm not with Loblaws anymore. And I have had 25 years with Canadian Tire, and then 7.5 years with Loblaws, both in Toronto, on a national level. So very, very privileged work that I have done, and am doing this on somewhat of a full-time basis for now. On a personal note, before we get into a couple of slides, I wanted to let you know that I've got two kind of hooks into this subject area. One is there was an injury when I was born, and it affected my right arm. I've got a palsy in my right arm. And so I grew up very much knowing what it's like to have barriers enforced on me. I was told things that I probably couldn't do, not by my parents. Thank goodness. My parents were those type of people that are pull yourself up by the bootstraps and be strong. And if it weren't for them, I might have succumbed to the pressure from friends, from extended family, that tried to put me into a bit of a box of what I could do, not only physically but mentally. My other kind of foray into this field is my brother-in-law, my husband's brother. He's an adult, and he's developmentally handicapped. And he worked for many, many years for a hardware company, a very small hardware company in Toronto. And after a few years of him working there, we stumbled upon the fact that he had been abused by the hardware owner, and both physically and emotionally. And of course, we pulled him out immediately of that situation. But it behooves us to try and move forward. And so I tell you these stories because you'd think that I'd have a very keen interest and understanding of this topic area. But you know what? I didn't. Not until I got involved in the panel report did I actually start to understand, holy cow, this is complex, and there's huge opportunity here. So that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. You probably know this, but I didn't when I first got into this. And so just a rundown of the lay of the land across Canada. Now, I do have one Ontario stat in there. I apologize. We did try to get Alberta, but I was unable to. Yeah, do you like Ontario? Okay. So look at how many people are looking for work. Almost 1 million people not finding work right now. They do have some sort of disability, and they can't find a job. And the most staggering thing about that is lots of them are skilled. They've got a college degree or a university degree. And in fact, in Ontario, and I have no reason to believe that Alberta would be any different, we have a staggering amount of students with disabilities entering into college systems and university systems. And in fact, we outpace the rest of the world in the research that we've been able to find. So I think over time what we're going to find with this stat is we're going to have a lot of very educated, well-educated students leaving their institutions looking for jobs. And that is not on an employer's radar. Unemployment rate for people with disabilities, extremely high, probably the highest I've seen of any minority group. And then, of course, there's the buying power. You know, 53% of Canadians have got some sort of disability. And then when you think about the halo effect of their families around them, that's a big, big number. So it just makes sense that this would be on business's radar. So let me talk a little bit about our history. I talked about the panel. We produced a book, and for those who are listening virtually, I'm showing the book that was the result of some work that we did at the federal level. And you can download it for free via the HRSDC federal website. And it's called Rethinking Disability in the Private Sector. And I worked with some great people, my buddy Mark from Tim Hortons that you just saw on the video, Ken Fredine from Deloitte, and Gary Birch from Neil Squire Society, and me. So it was a dynamic foursome. And that's exactly what we did. We went across Canada and tried to learn as much as we could about what was going well and what were some of the barriers. And the high-level findings that we found is that where it's happening, people are saying it's actually very, very good for business. And that was a bit of a, really, not a corporate social responsibility play. But the vast majority were completely unaware of this opportunity. Where it was happening, the keys were leadership. You actually had people at the top saying, I want to make this happen. You had organizations that were flexible and adaptable. Okay, if we can't do it this way, we'll do it that way. That's where we found it working. But you know what? We found a ton of myths that still exist. And so these myths are probably not surprising to many of you. You know, the first three all talk about you know, the cost of doing business. So workers with disabilities are more likely to have accidents. Well, that actually, in fact, based on the research that we've been able to pull, is not true by about half. Health insurance costs going higher. Actually, no, that's not the case again. And workers with disabilities need more supervision and don't perform well. Again, wrong. In fact, what we have found in those first three is it takes longer for someone to get trained up for the bar. If the bar of performance is here, it might take a bit longer, a week longer if it's a you know, a few days training program. It takes them a bit longer to get there, but once they're there, very, very solid performance. They follow standard operating procedures, for example. Again, in general, people with disabilities are not well educated. Well, we know from the stats that that's not true, and it's going to get even more so. So there are a lot of finance gurus out there, a lot of IT gurus who have got some sort of disability because they are going through the university and college systems. The cost of accommodating a person with disability is prohibitive. You saw the Walgreens. I was down at the Walgreens distribution center and actually saw with my own eyes the rhinoceros little piece of paper to show people where to go. So that just wasn't for the film. That is actually true. That costs nothing to put that up. And another great story that I had was a little boutique hotel in Halifax on the East Coast. And they're in a community where there is a high level of hearing impaired. And they've partnered proactively with a couple of agencies in Halifax. And so a lot of their cleaning staff, housekeeping staff, are hearing impaired. And how they've gotten over that with customers is they put a little card on the pillow. When the customer comes into the room, they see a little card that says, it's highly likely that your housekeeper is hearing impaired. And if you have any trouble whatsoever communicating with them, they do read lips, but if you have any trouble, just let us know at the front desk and we'll help you out. Well, they are so outpacing anyone else in Halifax in the hotel industry. The loyalty base from their customers are amazing. And again, what was the cost of doing that? It was nothing, right? A little card to explain what the situation was. More myths. This one I've heard over and over and over again from employers, that I can't fire or discipline someone with a disability. So not true. There is no special procedure for that. Everyone needs clear accountabilities. Everyone needs to understand what is expected of them, and everyone needs to deliver against that. Right? Doesn't matter if you've got blue eyes or a disability. It's a pretty standard approach. And et cetera, et cetera. You can see the myths. You probably have seen all of these in your time. So common mistakes made by employers, and again, this was when we went across Canada and what we found. Lack of tone from the top. You know, Rich Donovan said it in the video up front, what gets measured gets done. A business measures itself all the time, 7 ways to Sunday, and what gets measured gets done. And so if a business leader from the top says, this is important to me, and I want to do it, and we're going to measure ourselves against it, guess what? It's going to happen. A belief that disability community is a small demographic, we know that that's not true. Hiring people with disabilities is just the right thing to do. Well, again, yeah, that's nice, but there's a business case to this, and that's where the business people aren't aware of that. And searching for the perfect role for the disabled, I've heard that again. I heard it in my own organization. Well, what role would we give them? Holy cow. Like, what role would you give a person with blue eyes? Like, it depends on the role. It depends on the skill set, right? So stop looking for that perfect role. Government legislation will enforce inclusion. Although I would say Canada is far, far leading in the world in terms of government legislation, hallelujah, it's just the bare minimum. And if a corporation is putting their strategy on what legislation says, I think they're missing the boat. And still working on best practices. We heard from a lot of organizations, haven't quite got my policies and practices figured out yet. Dip your toe in the pond is what I say. Start small, put your toe somewhere in the pond and get going. But then we heard some great successes. And you know how I said businesses measure everything. Businesses measure everything. And so we put down a few of the most common measures under customers and how you engage your customer base, under cost and how you manage the cost to running your business, and finally under colleagues and how you engage your colleagues. And each of those bullet points underneath there gets measured in large, medium, small organizations. Maybe not all of them, but most of them do. And where we saw successes across Canada, they had successes in each of these 1, 2, 5 of those examples. And so there is a very real business case there. So lots to do. That's what we found across Canada. Lots of myths, lots of mistakes being made, but we had these little gems like the Halifax Hotel where things were going very, very well. And so we came out of that, Ken Fredine and Mark Wafer and I, scratching our heads saying, we can't just let this report go. We've got to move this forward. And so we asked the Minister of Finance for some seed money, and we asked Loblaws for some seed money, which they both graciously agreed to provide. And we have started up a not-for-profit called Canadian Business SenseAbility. And our mandate is to really take the findings that we found across Canada and start bringing them to life. We have a board, and it's comprised of private sector business leaders and I'll come back to that in a second. We also have an advisory board, people who are not in the private sector, but from whom we want to listen, because they've got their various stakeholder groups, agencies, government, will be part of our advisory board. And we will have a website launch this summer. We have a CEO hired, Joan Turner, who is here at the conference yesterday and today. And we have an official launch coming up September 17th. And that week will be in various cities across Canada. And our approach, it's going to be slightly different from other organizations. Other organizations look for literally hundreds of members. We're actually looking for very few at the beginning. This is complex. There's a reason why this has not taken hold yet in the private sector. And I think one of the reasons is people don't know where to start. And it isn't a cookie-cutter approach. Every business is very, very different, and they've got a different maturity in how they think about disability. They have different business issues. And so what we want to do is we want to work with a very few select members, and we want to go deep into their organization. And you know those metrics I showed you around cost, customer, and colleague? We want to talk to them about those measures. And where do they have opportunities in turnover, in productivity costs, to improve their business, in top-line sales growth? Where are those opportunities? And then how can we put a plan together that has some disabled community a part of that plan? And our ask with Corporate Canada is don't lower the bar. Every time we knock on doors to talk to them, oh, here we go, my productivity standards are going to go down. No, they're not. Keep your bar high. Keep your bar high. But the point is, Mr. Business or Miss Business, you want the best team in Canada to be a part of your team. And the best team comes in different shapes and sizes. So keep that bar high, but open up the net, cast the net wider, and employ more people with varying degrees of abilities. And we'll provide practical support, very much geared towards what's important to a business. You know, I worked for 2 very large organizations. It's fast-paced. You've got to be, you know, when you're hiring someone, you got to hire quickly, right? There's a lot of pressure to get going. And so we've got to make sure that business have got practical tools to make it simple for them. But finally, business is only one piece of this complex puzzle. There are so many stakeholder groups that have got accountabilities in different ways. Government, for sure, at the provincial level and at the federal level, around policy refinements. So if you think about it, think about policies where you've got, if the end objective is to have more employers hire people with disabilities, keep that end objective there, employers hiring more people with disabilities, and put your policies around that. Make it easy for an employer. So I'll give you an example. Wage subsidies, I think, and our organization thinks, is a very bad thing. And I'm sorry if that is a bit controversial, but if you think about it, it's telling the employer that this is a high-risk situation. That's wrong. The business case doesn't support that. And so why are we okay with wage subsidies? It's teaching employers the wrong thing. And then when that wage subsidy goes, guess what? So does the body. So we've got to definitely do something different at that level. The other thing around government is, again, Canadian Tire and Loblaws, thousands of stores across Canada in thousands of different communities. Agencies all operate very differently. They have different ways of approaching the problem. They have different value adds that they bring to an employer. There needs to be more standards put in place for ease. So when I get a store manager in Red Deer saying, you know, who do I contact, it makes it very, very easy for an employer to go out and know exactly what that agency is going to give them. And so I'm looking for more standards from government. Academia. It is tough pulling research. It's little bits and pieces here and there. And so I would love universities to step up and start pulling together some of the research and housing it so that it makes it easier for all of us as stakeholders to grasp onto that. That's the only way we're going to know we were here and now we're there, or we were here and now we're there. We need to measure our success. And job-ready skill sets. I think schools need to take more responsibility for getting students ready, not just the learned skills from the functional expertise that they gained at school, but life social skills as well. Community partners, huge opportunity with our community partners. Right now, I would say if you think about, again, the hiring spectrum, and I'm going to break this down a bit. I send a person, I'm an agency right now, I send a person into Loblaws, and I get triggered for some sort of government support based on that person going into Loblaws. And then 2 months down the road or 3 months down the road, something shifts, and all of a sudden I need help, and that agency doesn't have the resources to help because they're very focused on getting the person in the role only. And so that whole hiring spectrum, before hire, getting the person ready to job, and then downstream support afterwards, I think we need more of from our community partners. And finally, people with disabilities. They have a role to play. We have a role to play. I call it a reality check. I've had many, many experiences with people who have had some sort of disability demanding that they do a job that, quite honestly, they can't do because of the skill set. And so be honest with yourself, have a reality check, but on the flip side, push your boundaries, right? Don't be told by someone what you can't do, by parents, etc. Push your boundaries, try and get some experience, and give us all feedback, because this is, like I said, a very complex issue. So that's it. I feel like, you know, in the last year, I feel like there's more momentum on this subject. I don't know if you would agree with that, but I just feel like there's more momentum and more willingness to talk. I would say also that Alberta is very much leading across Canada, and so thank you for your leadership on that. And I think between all of us, business, which we're hoping to help, and then all of these other areas, we will make a difference. We will. Thank you. Questions? Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Kathy. Oops. Me again on the family end of things. And with the business is only one piece of the puzzle, I have to comment that, you know, yesterday we heard several times from the panel members that the family is what was there through it all. The family was the one who, not the ones who put limits on. I know in the morning, Haley was speaking about, you know, that a parent had limits, and but, you know, really, it is the family. We heard from the panel members that it is the family that supports, encourages, and doesn't have the limits. So I think another piece of the puzzle is the family's support to help their children with disabilities prepare for the job market. It's not, you know, only academia. The consistent, highly skilled, highly motivated, highly committed piece of the puzzle is the family.
Yeah, I would agree. Very much so.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
My name's Kent Kinberg. I actually have Asperger's syndrome.
Yes.
You're talking about Canadian Tire. I actually just recently stopped working for them, kind of an agreement about my shoulder. I was a service advisor there and had to pull tires, and that was my shoulder. But they were they didn't look at my disability as a flaw. I got paid the same way. The other point that I want to make too, what that lead was just talking about too, is my parents, just like your parents, my mom was always there to support me. My dad not so much so. You know, yeah,
No, they have a major role to play, I agree.
they do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
2 points. First of all, keep the bar high and keep pushing it higher. Absolutely. And I would like to add one thing to that. Start early. I'm with CNIB, and I've been with them off and on for a variety of different jobs. And one of the things I hear consistently from the folks who work directly with children and families is the expectations aren't there. So kids don't wake up after their 18th birthday and all of a sudden have this ability to measure up. So I commend you for that. The other thing, and I'd like to, I'm sure if challenge is the right word for it, but I'd like to challenge you on this about your point about wage subsidies.
Go for it.
Okay. Whether we like to admit it or not in this room, we're all the converted. We all get it. We've all had different experiences and different interfaces with employers and sort of dealing around the challenges. But reality tells us that most HR people, because they come from this thing called society, have probably never met a person with disability. A gentleman got up yesterday and spoke to the fact that HR training programs don't even talk to disability. So if that's the reality, and perhaps it's not, but in my very limited, skewed world, it is. By keeping wage subsidies on the table, and yes, to my friends in government, that's your role. That's definitely your role to support that. Whether it's real, whether it's a good business case or not, it does say to the employer, I'm taking a risk, real or not, and that's in parentheses, and society is sharing that with me. We know that sometimes it's not going to work out. That's life. Whether you have a disability or not, not every job that you get is perfect. There's not a perfect match. The recruiting process involves these funny machines called people, and they never work right, right? Because we have all kinds of filters and stuff that gets in the way of making it perfect. So by keeping this wage subsidy tool as part of the toolkit, in those environments or in those situations where the risk is perceived, it can be mitigated by wage subsidies. It can provide a level of comfort to take someone who needs job modification, and until they get it right, be that a day, a week, 6 months, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Until they get it right, there's that partnership that's perceived by the employer, which will which will ease the pain, if you will. Again, perceived or otherwise. At the same time, in my early years, when I did direct service for a variety of agencies, we went program trick-or-treating. Every 6 months there was a new program come out. Bring people in, provide them with training, and at the end of the training, let's wait for the next program. That's not right either. So somehow there has to be a way to manage that risk and provide the employer with that level of comfort and that tool that some will choose to use and hopefully most won't.
Well, thank you. For me, I believe it's a crutch. I really do. And I think that if we are going to change behaviors, we've got to start getting employers to walk. And it's, to me, it's, we're incenting the wrong behavior. And so we're where we are because we built it that way. We built the system that way. Okay, next question from the web.
All right, right, so we've got a question from the web audience. What are your top priorities for Canadian Business SenseAbility?
So top priorities are we're going to have a website available to total public. And we'll be a one-stop shop. You know, we can't have everything on there, and think about it, it's going to be mostly geared towards employers, but it will be a good resource tool for all different stakeholder groups. So getting tools, research documents, handy tips, all in one stop is one of the major priorities that we can hit masses with fairly quickly. But concurrent to that, we do want to partner with a couple of, like I said, a few strong-minded organizations who want to go on this journey with us. And we want to get into a business case with them and have them dip their toe in the pond and get started. And once they see some traction, they'll start rolling it out themselves. So those would be the two priorities. One more.
Hi. I really liked a lot of the things that you've said. You seem like you're coming from private business, and you're also connected with, sounds like, the Minister of Finance, which is that's a unique position to be in. And you're taking it from a perspective as well of the employer, rather than the really what the community partners in nonprofit are doing is working with individuals and employers as individuals. You seem to be looking at it more from, when you're talking about employers, I think you're talking about corporations.
Yes.
And I've been in nonprofit for about, I don't know, 15 years or something now. And our main customer is your mom and pop kind of business, because they're more flexible in terms of being able to accommodate time of day, so forth, for the jobs, and unions aren't involved.
Yeah.
But one of the comments you made about more from our community partners in terms of support, community partners right now, nonprofits, are really struggling. Government of Canada in Edmonton area hasn't provided funding for opportunities programs or skills links programs for quite a few people. I belong to a group called PCDC, who is a private career development contractors, and I would say, I'm seeing businesses go out of business, and I'm seeing people really struggle to keep staff. And so I guess another thing that drifted through my mind was yesterday Haley Wickenheiser was talking about burnout and the amount of effort that goes into job maintenance without funding. And it's something we do. If somebody has a job and they have a problem 8 months down the road, we're there, and we're not getting paid for it. And we do a lot of our business, I think, gratis. And when we come into tough times, we have staff that say, we'll take a lower wage. So, what I'm thinking is, and I'd like to get your perspective, is how do we fund this? It sounds to me like you're coming from business should be funding it, but the government has a responsibility, I think, to nonprofits to see that contracts don't come to an end and then it's 6 months before another one starts.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and I actually do believe that funding needs to continue to the not-for-profits, for sure I do, but it's a misappropriation, I think, of how the funds are spent. So I'm actually saying, let's not spend any more. Let's even take what we're currently doing at the federal level and at the provincial level, but let's make sure that the funding supports sustained employment. And sustained employment might mean that a service agency gets, instead of a great big spike in funding at the time that the person lands in the chair at the hiring, that it's actually across more of a spectrum, getting the person ready for hire, hire, and then downstream from hire. So to me, that is a lot more successful if you're an employer. I know that I can go to you because you've got my back. You help me bring that person in, you're going to help me when I've got problems downstream. It's a lower risk for me as an employer. So that's what I'm suggesting, is that the funding actually gets done in a different way.
Thanks, Kathy. Nice job.